There I was. Just another day winding down, you know? Sitting on that slightly uncomfortable bus seat, the kind that's hard enough to make you wish you'd walked instead. But there I was, headphones on, volume up, trying to drown out the world with a bit of music. It's my little ritual after a long day of work, a way to shut off my brain, even if just for the ride home. The bus was its usual self, filled with the same old faces and a few new ones, all of us just trying to get somewhere. It was one of those buses that had seen better days, squeaks and rattles accompanying every turn and stop, like a symphony of disrepair. But it was our ride, our chariot of the mundane, carrying us through the city's veins. On this particular evening, the bus seemed to hum with the quiet energy of people lost in their own thoughts, their own worlds. That's the thing about public transport. It's like a collection of stories, each person a chapter. Yet most of us never get past the first page with anyone else. I was lost in my music, a track I'd heard 1,000 times but never really listened to, you know? The kind that's just familiar enough to be comforting, but not enough to be truly memorable. That's when I felt it, a tap on my shoulder. It was gentle but unexpected, a break in the personal bubble we all carry around with us. Pulling one earbud out, I turned, a bit annoyed at first, to see who it was. There stood this older guy, probably in his late 60s, but with eyes that seemed to carry 100 years of stories. He had this rugged look about him, the kind that comes not from trying to keep up with some trend, but from a life lived hands-on. His face was etched with lines, each one probably a story in itself. "Nice boots," he said, his voice carrying a weight, a depth. It wasn't just a passing comment, it felt like an opener to something more, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it then. "Oh, thanks," I replied, a bit taken aback. Compliments from strangers weren't exactly common in the daily commute. It was usually headphones in, world out. But there was something about his manner, an openness. Or maybe it was just curiosity that made me pause my music. He went on to tell me how he used to wear boots just like mine, back in his days on construction sites. His words painted pictures of a time when things were simpler, or at least that's how he remembered it. He talked about the durability, how a good pair of boots could tell the story of the work done in them, the places they'd been. "You know, these boots have seen more of the city than most people," he chuckled. A sound that seemed to come from deep within, resonating with a mixture of nostalgia and something else I couldn't quite grasp at the moment. His laugh, it was genuine, the kind that's infectious. So I found myself smiling, drawn into this conversation that had started from nowhere. It was odd, this connection forming over something as mundane as footwear. But there it was, an unexpected bridge between two strangers on a bus. He shared a bit about his past, how he'd worked construction for most of his life, starting young. "Back when your mama was probably just a twinkle in your grandpa's eye," he said with a wink. The way he spoke, it was like he was inviting me into a world long gone, a world of hard work and harder living, of manual labor that built not just buildings, but character. As the city lights blurred past the windows, casting shadows that danced across his face, he told me about the buildings he'd helped raise from the ground up, structures that still stood as silent testaments to the sweat and toil of unseen workers. It was captivating, listening to him, a living link to the past, to a city that was, in many ways, so different from the one we were moving through now. And just like that, the mundane ride home turned into a journey through time, guided by a stranger whose name I didn't even know. Little did I realize, this was just the beginning, the prelude to a revelation that would turn my understanding of my own past, my own neighborhood, on its head. As we talked, the bus continued on its path, a vessel through the night, carrying Oos along with it. But the journey we were on, it had taken a turn down a road I hadn't expected, one that would lead to places dark and unsettling. So there we were, him diving into his past like it was yesterday, and me, I'm just soaking it all in. He starts telling me more about the old days, his days on the construction sites. And man, you could see his eyes light up, like he's right back there, young and full of beans. Not just some guy on a bus reminiscing about the good old times. He leaned back a bit, getting comfortable, or as comfortable as one can get on a bus seat that's seen better decades. Back then, he began, with this half smile, construction wasn't just a job, it was an adventure. Every day was something new, a problem to solve, a challenge to overcome. And boy did we overcome. His hands were animated as he spoke, painting the air with his words. You see, my dad started the business with nothing but a truck and a handful of tools, but he was a wizard with wood, a real craftsman. And me? I was just a kid, eager to learn, to build. By the time I was 15, I was on the sites, learning the trade from the ground up. He chuckled, a deep rumbling sound. We didn't have all this fancy equipment they have today. No, sir. It was all manual labor, blood, sweat, and sometimes, yeah, even tears. But there was pride in it, in seeing a plot of land transform, in knowing you had a hand in building something that would stand long after you were gone. The stories flowed one after another, like he was opening up a treasure chest of memories. He talked about the camaraderie among the crew, how they were like a family. We looked out for each other, had each other's backs. When one of us was in a jam, be it on the site or in life, we were there. That's how it was. Not just co-workers, but brothers. He paused, lost in thought for a moment. There was this one time, he continued. We were working on a house, a real beauty out on the edge of town. The owner wanted something unique, something that stood out. So my dad, he comes up with this design, something I'd never seen before. We all thought he was nuts, but when it was done, he whistled, a sound of pure admiration. It was a masterpiece. That house, it was more than just a building. It was art. As he shared these tales, it wasn't just the words, but the emotion behind them. You could feel the heat of the sun on your back, the satisfaction of a job well done, the aches and pains that came with hard work, and the joy of creation. It was like being transported to another time, another place, where every day brought a new challenge, and every challenge was an opportunity to prove yourself. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, he added, his tone shifting. Construction's a tough gig, dangerous too. We had our fair share of close calls, accidents, but we learned from them, got smarter, safer. It was all part of the job. He sighed, a long, drawn-out breath. And then, there were the perks, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. This was where the story took a turn, where the light-hearted reminiscing about the past began to edge into something darker, something I wasn't prepared for. What started as a trip down memory lane was about to become a journey into the shadows, a peek into the darker side of those good old days that weren't as simple or as innocent as they seemed. And I, unwittingly, was about to get a front row seat to a story that would stick with me, long after the bus ride ended. As he shifted gears into the perks of the job, I could feel the atmosphere around us change. It was like the air got denser, charged with a kind of tension you could almost grab. He leaned in a bit closer, lowering his voice, as if what he was about to share was meant for my ears only. The bus, with its dim lighting and the soft hum of the engine, suddenly felt like a stage set for a tale I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. You know, kid, the construction sites weren't just about work. They were playgrounds for us, in more ways than one. His voice had this edge to it, a rasp that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. After hours, those half-built frames, they were like a world apart from the regular day-to-day grind, a place where rules didn't quite apply the same way. He went on, detailing how, as kids, they'd sneak onto the sites, playing hide-and-seek among the skeletal structures of soon-to-be homes. It was a rush, you know? Being somewhere you weren't supposed to be, discovering all the nooks and crannies. That part I got. Heck, I did the same thing as a kid. But as he spoke, there was a shift, a darker undertone that began to weave its way through his nostalgia. But as we got older, he continued, his gaze drifting to a point somewhere beyond the bus's worn interior. Those escapades, they evolved. He described how the sights became the backdrop for teenage mischief, for parties that stretched into the early hours, fueled by stolen booze and the thrill of the forbidden. There's something about being in a place that's not yet marked by the world, you know? It's liberating. At first, it sounded like typical rebel youth stuff, but then he took it further, much further. And then, there were the women. The way he said it, casual yet loaded, sent a chill down my spine. Imagine, a place where you can be anyone, do anything. No neighbors to complain, no walls to confine your desires. He painted a picture of clandestine meetings, of sneaking off with girls, lured by the thrill of the unconventional. It was all fun and games at first, just young folks enjoying the freedom, the secrecy. But as he spoke, his tone darkened, his words slowing, heavy with implication. But you know, sometimes things got out of hand. The bus rumbled on, oblivious to the unfolding narrative, to the descent into a past that was spiraling into something sinister. You see, when you're in a place like that, a place that's halfway between what it was and what it will be, it's easy to lose yourself, to cross lines you didn't even know were there. He paused, a long, heavy pause that seemed to fill the space between us with a palpable sense of foreboding. There were times when things went too far, when the morning light would reveal more than just the aftermath of a night's excess. His voice was a whisper now, a confessional murmur that made my blood run cold. And in those moments, when you're standing there, with the dawn breaking over a scene you wish you could erase, that's when you realize the true value of an unfinished home. It's not just a structure, it's a sanctuary, a hiding place for secrets that aren't meant to see the light of day. As he spoke, the darkness of his past unfolded, a tapestry of actions and consequences, of deeds hidden in the shadows of those skeletal buildings. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. You want to look away, but you can't. You're caught in the gravity of the story, of the man sitting next to you, who's suddenly a stranger in the most unsettling way. And the thing about secrets, he continued, his voice barely above a breath, is they need to stay hidden. And there's no better place to hide something, or someone, than in the foundation of a new beginning. That's when it hit me, the full weight of his words, the realization of what he was implying. The playful tales of youth and rebellion had morphed into something dark, a narrative of loss and concealment, of deeds so grim they could only be whispered in the dim light of a city bus. The stories of his past, once filled with the bright hues of nostalgia, now took on the stark, chilling shades of horror, painting a picture of a man who knew too intimately the line between creation and destruction. And as the bus rolled on, carrying us through the night, I was left to grapple with the revelation that I was sharing this transient space with someone who had crossed that line, who had ventured into the darkest corners of human experience, and emerged with secrets buried deep within. The gravity of his confession, veiled though it was in the guise of casual reminiscence, settled over me like a shroud. Each word, each pause, seemed to echo in the confined space of the bus, resonating with a sinister truth that was impossible to ignore. It was no longer just a story, it was an admission, a glimpse into the abyss that lies just beneath the surface of the mundane. As the silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of the windows, I found myself caught in a torrent of emotions. There was fear, yes, a primal response to the proximity of potential danger. But there was also fascination, a morbid curiosity about the depths of the human psyche, about what drives a person to such extremes. He seemed to sense my turmoil, the whirlwind of thoughts and feelings that his revelations had stirred. With a sigh, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of untold burdens, he leaned back, his gaze returning to the present, to the here and now. "You know, kid," he said, his voice returning to the rough-hewn timbre of earlier conversation, "life's a funny thing. It's a series of moments, choices, that shape us, for better or worse. And sometimes, those moments, They take us down paths we never expected to walk. The bus slowed, its brakes hissing softly as it approached a stop. He stood, a figure suddenly looming, casting a long shadow in the dim light. "This is me," he announced, as if the gravity of our conversation hadn't transformed him from a simple fellow passenger into a harbinger of dark truths. As he made his way to the door, I couldn't help but watch, caught in the grip of a story that had turned my simple bus ride home into a journey through the heart of darkness. The door opened with a pneumatic sigh, and he paused, turning back to me with a look that was both enigmatic and resigned. "Be careful out there," he said, a simple farewell that carried the weight of a warning, a benediction from a man who had ventured beyond the pale and returned with the knowledge of what lies in the shadows. And then he was gone, swallowed by the night, leaving me to grapple with the reality of his tale. The bus pulled away, its lights cutting through the darkness, carrying me further from the encounter, but not from its impact. The story he had shared, the glimpse into a life marked by unthinkable acts, clung to me, a specter that would not be easily dismissed. As the city passed by outside the window, a tapestry of light and shadow, I found myself looking at it differently, wondering about the secrets hidden behind closed doors, beneath the foundations of the homes we live in. His story, a dark confession disguised as casual reminiscence, had revealed a world where the lines between right and wrong, between the past and the present, were blurred and indistinct. In the end, what lingered was not just the chilling narrative of deeds done in the cover of darkness, but the realization of how closely we all teeter on the edge of our own abysses, how easily the fabric of our lives can be torn asunder by the choices we make. As the bus rolled on, carrying me away from that moment but not its memory, I was left to ponder the nature of secrets, of the darkness that dwells in the heart of man, and the lengths to which we go to keep our shadows hidden. And in the silence of the ride, in the solitude of my thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was a much more complicated, much darker place than I had ever imagined. The moment he stepped off the bus, leaving me to stew in the aftermath of his tales, it felt like the air shifted back to normal, if normal was even a thing anymore. I was left there, headphones dangling in my hand, music forgotten, as the bus trundled on, the rhythm of the city reclaiming its space around me. But inside, everything had changed. The world seemed different, darker, weighted down by the stories he'd left behind. I couldn't shake the feeling, the gnawing in my gut, that what I just heard wasn't just some old man's ramblings, but confessions veiled in the guise of nostalgia. The bus, once a mundane vessel for my daily commute, now felt like a confession booth on wheels, carrying the weight of secrets too heavy for one man to bear alone. As we moved away, the streetlights flickered past, casting shadows that seemed to dance with a sinister glee, as if they too knew the dark secrets that had just been shared. I looked around at the other passengers, wondering if any of them had overheard, if they too were now carrying the burden of the knowledge that some stories, once told, can't be untold. The gravity of his parting words, "Be careful out there," hung over me like a shroud. It wasn't just a casual goodbye. It was a warning, a caution from someone who had navigated the darker paths of human existence, and had emerged, not unscathed but changed, marked by the deeds of his past. As the bus pulled into my stop, I realized I was hesitant to stand, to signal my departure from this transient space of confession. The simple act of pulling the cord, signaling my desire to exit, felt monumental, as if in doing so, I was leaving behind more than just a physical space, but stepping away from a moment in time that had irrevocably altered my perception of the world. Stepping off the bus, the cool night air hit me, a stark contrast to the warmth of the crowded interior. The city around me, with its familiar sights and sounds, suddenly felt alien, a landscape altered not by physical change, but by the shadows cast by the stories that now lurked in the back of my mind. The walk home was a blur, my feet moving on autopilot, while my mind raced, replaying the conversation, dissecting each word, each pause, each veiled hint at truths too dark to fully comprehend. The thought that I might have been the unwitting confidant to a man whose past was stained with actions so vile it chilled, the blood was overwhelming. As I turned the corner onto my street, the houses that lined the block, each unique in its design and history, now seemed to harbor their own secrets. The realization that beneath the veneer of suburban normalcy could lie darkness so profound it could consume the soul was a revelation that shook me to my core. And then, there it was, my house, standing innocuous and welcoming, a beacon of normality in the swirling maelstrom of my thoughts. But as I approached, the memory surfaced, unbidden but insistent, of a discovery made in the innocence of childhood. A pair of boots found buried under the porch, a seemingly mundane mystery that now took on a sinister aspect in the light of the stranger's revelations. The connection between those long-forgotten boots and the stories of buried secrets and deeds hidden in the foundations of homes across the city was a thread that, once pulled, seemed to unravel the very fabric of my understanding of the world. The thought that my own home, the place where I had grown up, played and lived, could be part of a narrative so dark it was almost beyond comprehension, was a revelation that left me reeling. Standing there in the shadow of my own home, I was struck by the fragility of our grasp on reality, on the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of our existence. The realization that beneath the surface of every story, every memory, lies the potential for darkness so profound it can alter the course of our lives, was a revelation that would haunt me, a specter lurking in the corners of my mind, long after the night had given way to the light of day. So there I was, standing on the sidewalk, staring up at my house like I'm seeing it for the first time. Every window, every brick, felt like it was staring back, hiding stories within its walls I'd never thought to question. The weight of the stranger's confessions hung over me like a dark cloud, mixing with my childhood memories to create a storm of doubt and fear. The boots, those damn boots, how could I have forgotten about them? We were just kids, running wild around the neighborhood, exploring every construction site, every new house like it was our personal playground. And then one day we found those boots, half buried under my front porch. We thought it was the coolest mystery, like a treasure waiting to be discovered. Little did we know, it might have been a clue to something so much darker. Walking up the driveway felt like traversing an invisible barrier, stepping into a world that was suddenly unfamiliar. The laughter and screams of our childhood games echoed in my mind, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped me now. Every step felt heavier, each movement laden with the weight of newfound knowledge and unasked questions. As I reached the porch, the site of our treasure hunt all those years ago, I couldn't help but pause. The memories were so vivid, so innocent. We dug up those boots with the excitement of young adventurers, unaware that we might have been unearthing secrets far beyond our understanding. The realization that my childhood sanctuary could be the final resting place of someone's dark deeds was a pill too bitter to swallow. The house looked the same as it always had, yet everything felt different. The walls that had once held the laughter and tears of my family now seemed to whisper secrets in a language I couldn't understand. The foundation, once a mere structural necessity, now felt like a barrier, hiding truths just beneath its surface. That night, sleep was a stranger. My bed, a place of rest and dreams, became a stage for nightmares to play out, each one a variation of the stories the stranger had shared. The darkness of my room felt oppressive, a tangible reminder of the darkness that might lie just beneath my feet. The morning light brought no relief, only a stark clarity. I knew I couldn't let it go, couldn't just move on and pretend like that conversation on the bus was just a random interaction. There were too many coincidences, too many connections that tugged at my conscience, demanding attention. So I did what any sane person would do when faced with the possibility of living atop a hidden crime. I started digging, not just physically, though there was some of that too, in a desperate attempt to find or disprove the existence of more buried secrets. No, most of my digging was in records, in old newspapers, in any piece of history about the neighborhood I could get my hands on. What I found, or rather what I didn't find, only deepened the mystery. No missing persons reports that matched up, no unsolved crimes that fit the timeline. It was as if the stranger's confessions were just that. Stories meant to unsettle but with no basis in reality. Or perhaps the truth was buried deeper than I could dig, hidden beneath layers of time and silence. In the end, the questions remained, unanswered and haunting. The connection between my childhood memories, the boots, and the potential crimes spoken of by a stranger on a bus had woven themselves into a narrative I couldn't escape. It was a story that lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the mysteries that can hide in plain sight, of the secrets that our homes, our neighborhoods, might hold. And so I share this story with you, not as a tale of horror meant to scare, but as a call to action. Look around, question the normalcy of your surroundings, the history of your homes. You never know what secrets lie buried, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. If you've ever stumbled upon something strange, something that doesn't quite fit the narrative of your life or your home, don't ignore it. Explore it, share it. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are true.